And just there we are. We're live, guys. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Thursday book celebration. I'm Malika King Albrecht. I am the founding editor of Redheaded Stepchild, and also I get to every once in a while celebrate with dear friends like tonight. I'll tell you a little bit about Jennifer Weiss, and I think you're going to be really excited. I love the cover, but we'll get into some questions because I do have some questions for you, Jennifer. Her book, How Should We Dress to Spread Ashes, is now available through Finishing Line Press. And I'm going to give you a brief bio because I love some of the details in Jennifer's bio. Um, Grew up in rural New Jersey and graduated from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and also University of Virginia's Law School. After a career of practicing law, serving in North Carolina House of Representatives, and running a nonprofit, she is devoting more time to writing, and boy, are we grateful. She has appeared in Kakalak, North Carolina Literary Review, the Main Street Rag, and many other publications. When she's not writing, she is volunteering, swimming, reading, gardening, hiking, and spending time with her family. She is passionate about children's literacy. You and I share that in common deeply. For more information, you can go to Jennifer Weiss's website. I will put that link in the chat section. And now I'm going to hand it over to you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for coming here and letting us celebrate with you.
Thank you so much, Malika, and thank you to so many wonderful friends and family members who are joining us tonight. I apologize, as I mentioned earlier, the good news is I sound like Deborah Winger. The bad news is I don't look like her. So bear with me. This is not my normal voice. I'm waiting for it to come back. But I am going to share some poems with you. These poems were inspired really by my parents and thinking about them from childhood on and walking beside them as they got older. I really want to thank you, Malika and Redheaded Stepchild, for sponsoring this celebration and launch and open mic. I'm really honored to be part of this. So thank you. And I mentioned earlier, Malika has a book coming out, so that's exciting too. I want to thank my family and friends for coming tonight. And I wanted to mention the many poetry friends who have helped me with my poetry over the years. And the late Michael Glazer, who was the Poet Laureate of Maryland, who encouraged me to publish this book. So that's kind of by way of introduction. So I'm going to share some poems with you tonight, and I am happy to take friendly questions. So that's a political joke. But anyway, I figure I've been at my share of press conferences, so this can't be as bad. The first poem I'm going to read, the book is in two parts. The first part features mainly poems about my dad and my relationship with him. And the second part features poems about my mom, who outlived my dad by about 12 years, and my relationship with her. But hopefully the book transcends those personal relationships and is more about kind of walking beside parents and helping them out as they get older. The first poem is called Half-Light. It was a semifinalist with the North Carolina Literary Review James Applewhite Poetry Prize contest a couple of years ago.
Message. I didn't turn my...
Oops. Okay, here we go. Weekdays he rose before dawn, girding his body in starch and silk and gray wool twill, thrusting hairless calves in taut black socks, buckling and lacing black leather belt and dress Oxfords. Once in summer, I startled him at the kitchen counter, staring out the window in the half-light, scorched percolator for company. He gulped bitter coffee from an orphan cup. Smooth face and rough whisper, he bent down. It's early. What are you doing up? Go back to bed. I returned to my room, hugged my pillow, listened for the growl and pop of the engine, the scatter of scree when his tires met the road. I pictured him gripping wheel and gear stick and smoldering camel, news station blaring, suit jacket sprawled back seat like a spent beast, starting his trek to work. That's one of the early poems. And what I will say is that we lived in a rural part of New Jersey. I know some folks are surprised. They think that's an oxymoron, but there really are rural parts of New Jersey. And my dad used to drive 60 miles each way to get to work in Manhattan. So that is the reference to him driving. And Malika, if you have questions, let me know. I'm looking at a manuscript right now, so I can come back to you if anybody has a question. The next poem I'm going to read is a short poem. It's called Last Holiday. I made an apple pie for his last holiday. Crisp Granny Smiths cut in even slices, drenched in lemon juice, sugar, and nutmeg. No cinnamon, the way he liked it. Spooned, between layers of cool hand-rolled dough, pinched together in loops, triple slit on top, egg washed for a golden crust, served dolloped with just whipped heavy cream. He ate slowly, laboring to breathe, savoring each bite. I sat beside him, waiting for him to finish before clearing the table. It's the most delicious pie I've ever eaten, he told me, again and again. Okay, the next poem I'm going to read is Tomes and Ducks, which was a finalist with the North Carolina Literary Review James Applewhite Poetry Prize. Tomes and Ducks. I recall your study, the antique English writing table, sturdy tweed couch, and collection of ducks adorning shelves of daunting books. A thick volume, the biography of Nicholas II, accompanied you to the hospital that year. Back and forth it rode in the hastily packed valise with your address book and striped cotton pajamas. Stopping in, we found you reading, your travel companion resting heavily on your gown-draped chest. Squinting, you looked up and smiled when you saw us. In your last monitored, breath-struggled moments, we held your hands and let you go. The czar, aslant an icy metal table, bore witness. Later, dazed, with you present, yet gone, we tossed everything, prescription bottles, leather slippers, and your well-traveled tome into the trash. At home, your bed waited. Beside it, on the nightstand, a stack of hardcover books. I actually was thinking, if you want to look at the cover of the book, we could make a drinking game out of this, because there are many mentions of items that are on the cover in the poems. So, if you want to do that, you can get something, a beverage of your choice, and each time you hear something, you can look at the cover and
this will be a first. I love it. I love it. This will be a first.
We've done a scavenger hunt with our granddaughter through the house to find the items. So, and she managed to find the pack of camels, which does not date back to the 1970s. I couldn't find any filterless ones. But anyway, she found them in a drawer. What do you do with a pack of camels? You don't want to give it to anyone as a gift. Harris Teeter won't take it back. And I didn't get the senior citizen discount on Thursday. I tried, but, I'll behave myself. But part of me wants to just send it one way to the White House. But in the meantime, I'll just hold on to it. And our granddaughter and I know where it is. So does anyone have any questions before I go back to reading, or shall I keep going?
Yeah, feel free to unmute. We're really relaxed here. And if something has occurred to you, also remember you can put it in the chat section and I will make sure that I circle back to any questions.
Okay.
Keep going, Jennifer. This is great.
I hope I'm not overwhelming anybody. Okay. I hope I'm not underwhelming anybody either. So here we go. The next poem is called Without Breathing. And this was first published in Kakalak Anthology of Poetry and Art a while back. Without breathing. I slip in like a paper clip, inhale, push off, cut through diamond splash, breathless until pools end. I foresee myself a fish gliding without breathing as the self-sculpted Barbie fancies life without food. Swimming back, I tilt, breathe, rays shoot from overhead lights like rounded puffs of dandelions before they waft away. When I climb out, the lane I had used the morning of the notice is empty. Sorry about your dad, a woman had said. I had nodded, launched, pounded without breathing. And that is kind of referring to having a moment to swim a couple days after my father died, and just being in that water and how healing it was, and also how odd that someone had read the obit. And for a long time after that, every time I got into that pool, I would look at that lane and remember that's where I swam that day. You know, how those experiences kind of imprint on your memory. So now I'm going to read a few poems about my mom and my relationship with my mom, who I mentioned outlived our dad by about a dozen years, and really had kind of an amazing last chapter up until maybe the last 2 years of her life. She had some illnesses, but she was really, she grieved mightily, but she really was incredibly strong. So this is a little bit about her origin story, and the poem is called Origins. And I've never read it before, so here we go. Reared in a gingerbread mansion on the Susquehanna, you were the second born, a shy, dark-eyed beauty who long grieved the death of your Cocker Spaniel, tended the Victory Garden hens, and gathered their eggs for Victoria, the family cook who snuck you treats. You beguiled men of all ages, a soldier back from the war who presented you in bobby socks and saddle shoes with a medal yanked from a dying Nazi. The flashy high school teacher who squired you to a jazz club and was fired the next day. Your mother was responsible, perhaps her only maternal act. You never forgave her for it. Your mother, a big-boned, bejeweled Baltimore girl who married into great wealth, mocked your naivete, envied your popularity, resented your fiance's audacity to court you when he came up poor in a clapboard row house on the other side of Harrisburg, raised by old school parents who kept kosher, went to shul, not a reform temple. The wrong kind of Jews. Your father went to Penn at 16, hurried home to help his newly widowed mother run the family business, an upscale women's shop where years later you worked after school, developed your sense of style. A kind, funny man you adored. He overlooked your mother's cruelty, landed on the wrong side of history by not favoring the formation of a Jewish state. The ensuing boycott of his namesake store led to financial ruin, an estate sale, a hasty move with your mother to a small bungalow in Florida, and subsidy checks you tucked into an envelope each month with a handwritten note signed Love. In weekly phone calls, your mother berated you. You will always be a first wife, his first wife. Mark my words, you will end up just a first wife. Actually, my mother and father stayed married for 52 years, so I think Hilda got it wrong. Okay, the next poem was an honorable mention in the North Carolina Poetry Society. Here's a mouthful. Jean Williams Poetry of Disability, Disease, and Healing Award, and it was published in Pine Song. It's called Madam Butterfly. Mom looks great, my brother proclaimed on a quick visit after she had endured pneumonia and sepsis. Maternal astronaut orbiting the sun, she ignored her tubed tether, the hiss and click of oxygen concentrator at apartment center, and served weak tea and sweet biscuits before alighting on a chair delighting in his quips. A monarch embroidered kimono, porcelain foundation, and blood red lipstick masked her sallow visage, haggard physique. When we were little, she fluttered through the house each evening, tidying rooms, readying her face, donning heels, before our father's headlights shot through the shutters like lightning, and thundering, he flung open the door. Okay, my next poem is called Tuesday. Here we go. Tuesday was Bills and Pills Day. After treatment, Mom plopped in her comfy armchair, later the pleather lift recliner. I sorted capsules, halved tablets for AM and PM, pen checks for her to sign. I cooked her supper, often shedding my shirt in her stifling kitchen, baking her favorite spinach souffle or turkey meatloaf, slicing and sauteing zucchini, onions, and peppers. You should get your thyroid checked, she chided. No, Mom, you should get your thermostat checked. It's hot as hell in here. I sat across from her and kept her company while she ate, enthralled by a legal analyst explicating Trump's impeachment. We giggled at his stubbled GQ look. When Mom plummeted, I emailed the journalist, shared my Democratic bona fides, her admiration for him. I entreated him to send her a card, checked her mailbox each day with fingers crossed. He never responded. That was kind of Bills and Pills Day. That just kind of hanging out with Mom and after chemo. And then the last poem I'm going to read is How Should We Dress to Spread Ash, which is the title of the chapbook. And this won the NC State Poetry Contest in 2022. Here we go. 2 days, 3 showers later, grit remains stubborn beneath my fingernails. Beach-bound, we agree on shorts and t-shirts, swimsuits and cover-ups, an old backpack and 2 buckets. Should I paint my nails to hide the remnants or bare them? Not business suits and ties, dress shoes. 13 adults struggling through sand would look like moon-marooned missionaries, or scrub with coarse brush and liquid soap in the laundry sink as after gardening. Still, we attract attention, passing purple pails among kin at dawn, sprinkling fistfuls of ash and bone chip like sown seeds. Will the grocery clerk judge me unkempt when my grime-lined fingers accept a receipt? Hi, Mom. Here you go, we whisper, releasing remains that commingle with sand between toes and cling to drugstore flip-flops. Only my left hand, sinister, I recall from Latin, is tarnished. She was also left-handed, my mother. After, my sister and I rinse buckets at ocean's edge. Our brother, the middle child, dives, stoic, into cold gray waves, emerges, glistening and whole. There you go. Well, thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you being here.
So very much. Y'all can unmute and we can just have a moment because I see everybody clapping. But Jennifer, you can't hear us. We're over here in that last poem. Perfect one to end on.
Clapping.
Yeah.
Thank you. That means so much to me. This is
So
first time
powerful.
I've read several of them together, and I really appreciate having this marvelous audience. So thank you.
I appreciate how difficult it is to, read all those poems, but I wanted to say something that I deeply admire with what you did. And not only are these poems like challenging in a narrative sense, emotional sense, the structure, the musicality is so well crafted. And I just want to say, brava, that's beautiful.
Thank
I know
you.
a lot of people did, yeah, and it is a lovely gift to your parents. Somebody just said they regret they have to leave, Jen, but they have to leave a little early. A
Thank you,
lot of us,
Diana.
Bye, Jen.
good. A lot of us wrote comments in the chat section, which I will be sending to you, but I just wanted to let people know
Thank
if
you.
you want to ask a question, jump in. If not, I really did want to hear about the history of the cover because it feels very personal and fits with the book so well. Can you
Thank
talk
you.
to that?
Sure. And a shout out to my wonderful neighbor, who is very shy, but Cliff Scott Williams took my cover shots, and he shot the cover, and he also, did my face, and did me a lot of justice, I have to say, bless him. But he's a wonderful, in addition to being a tech whiz, is a wonderful photographer and in his own right. And I want to, but I had this, when I think it's generational, but because I've noticed, not to generalize, but our kids are less attached to things, and more interested in experiences. And I probably had this conversation with a number of you because it's one of my rants. And if my kids are watching, sorry guys, but I get it. They are experiencing things. And I think we've gotten to the age, at a certain point, you realize that your possessions possess you as much as you possess them. And it becomes haunting because you've got all this stuff and you're like, what do you do with it? It's like someone flipped a switch and suddenly you're sitting on all this stuff. But when my parents died, and when people lose a parent or someone that they're really close to, their things almost become radioactive. I was talking to a friend about that today, and they take on this supernatural quality. And I felt like it was very important to honor these items and to make sure that they found good homes. And so I have a lot of them. My sister has a lot of them. My brother has a lot of them, nieces and nephews and children. But some, so most of the items on the cover, with the exception of the newer pack of cigarettes, which I mentioned I had to procure on a Thursday without the senior discount at Harris Teeter. And no, this is not an advertisement for Harris Teeter. But anyway, but it is a Thursday, right? So guys, you can get that senior discount. Get off the Zoom right now and drive down and get that 5%. But anyway, so I thought, well, I needed to assemble some of these items, and many of the items I refer to in the poems. And my father, both of my parents grew up during the Great Depression, and my father in particular, grew up, with not a lot. That was when you had a pot and a spoon and you played on the kitchen floor, and that was what you did. My mother was more affluent, but my father, when he really made it in business, he loved fine things and he bought things. And so a lot of those items were parts of collections that they had. And my father also traveled a lot. And when you get the book, you can read some other poems about, like, I have my mother's origin story, which I read, but I did not really read my father's origin story. So I had to leave some suspense for y'all. But some of the items in there, and there was another poem called Wanting about items. So I pulled some of those items together from curio cabinets. And I really did do a scavenger hunt with our oldest grandchild a couple months ago, just last month, where I carried her around the house, and we had my postcard and we looked at it, and then she had to find the items in the different cabinets. Just probably don't let the social services find out about this. Maybe it's cruel or something, but she really enjoyed that exercise. And we didn't sample the cigarettes or anything, I promise. They're unopened. But anyway, that is a very long-winded, now you understand why I'm hoarse, but that's a long-winded explanation for what's the cover. But I just felt like I needed to kind of honor their memory in that way.
It felt to me like an altar. It reminded me very much of like Day of the Dead or some of the stuff in New Orleans we would do to,
Oh, yeah.
invoke. And so I wonder, and that's very similar still though.
Thank you.
Thank you for like talking through that. And it felt like a very personal, it was interesting that the cover feels like that, it felt like personal to you. So thank you for that.
We did light one of the candles at one, so there is a flame. That's a real candle. And I remember telling myself, make sure you blow that thing out or you're going to have another book that's going to be even grimmer. But yeah, be sure to blow out the candle. Yeah.
Jennifer,
Thank you for the question.
do you hear me? Can I ask you something?
Yes.
I found extraordinary the poems, especially the part that I have realized with time with my grandparents and parents that people build a shrine of themselves as they go through life. And it's not just them, but also us. In my case, as I moved to different countries and places, I kept things. And nowadays, they take me to places in the past. I think our culture is becoming more visual, so we are losing that. And I think you are highlighting that, but the way that you deal with your parents is a little bit how we connect this constellation of things and memories that form that person. I think we are moving to a culture that we think that is already there online in videos. It's not the same thing. It
Well,
doesn't have the same value if you carry those things through your life.
Well, thank you for sharing that observation, Jorge. And Jorge is also a writer, so I appreciate it. And you're a novelist, but you speak like a poet. So I don't know, you might.
I'm not a poet.
I don't know. A poem is just a distilled version of, it's just liposuction fiction. I'm just telling you. But
Thank you.
Jennifer.
And I do think that, Jorge, a lot of times people say, oh, I am not a poet. But when we read some prose, we can see sometimes that same shimmer. Somebody just wrote something about leaving a rock. Who did that? Richard? What did that? Not you, other Rich. It was fascinating. I'm trying to find it. That comment.
Is that in Jewish culture, when you visit a cemetery, you leave a stone? Is that what the reference is to? I'm not sure.
That's what I was wondering, and I was hoping he would unmute and speak to that. But I can't find the quote now or the comment. Does anybody else have a question or
I do.
Jump in, Cal.
As a New Jersey native, I have been waiting to find out what town your parents lived in.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, I grew up in Skillman, New Jersey, which is 8 miles north of Princeton. It's in what's called the Sourland Mountains, although if you're from this area, if you're from North Carolina, you would not call the Sourlands Mountains. They're more like hills. But
is that horse country?
It's not as horsey as it's not as horsey. I mean, there were horses, but it's not like as horsey as other parts of New Jersey. But it's actually, we lived about 15 minutes from the Lindbergh estate. So that was where the kidnapping took place. So it was, and there was a lot of woods just beyond us. We lived in the woods, but there were very densely kind of forested areas. We spent a lot of time playing in the brook, looking under rocks. And what part of New Jersey are you from?
I'm from Livingston in the suburbs almost midway between Newark and Morristown.
Okay. And I just, for the rest of you all.
My dad loved to take trips on his days off and take us along as kids to
I would just say
places in Western New Jersey. And my grandfather had a summer place out there, which he sold at some point before I knew anything about it. But my father pointed out the building, but it became the Union 76 truck stop.
Oh dear. Oh, they paved paradise. Well,
Yeah.
I just want to point out to the group, many of whom have watched Saturday Night Live for many, many years, that you notice we didn't ask each other what exit, okay?
Yeah.
The whole, you're from Jersey, I'm from Jersey, what exit?
What
So I just
exit?
want to point out that like we can talk like normal people and ask each other where we're from without asking what exit. So, but anyway, well, thank
My
you for sharing
favorite
that.
natural sites is the Delaware Water Gap.
Yes,
So
it's beautiful.
and been through there many times, and I really love that scenery.
All right. Well, I think we need to write a book about New Jersey.
Yeah, I was going
Yeah.
to say, it sounds like you brought back some memories, Jennifer. I did want to ask you, when did this first poem come? Which one was it? And
Oh,
were you surprised when you started writing this? It had to have been a difficult book to keep coming back
thank you.
to and working on these
Yeah.
poems.
Yeah, these poems were long in the making, and the first poem was Tomes and Ducks. And that was right, my father died in December of 2007. So, I mean, my goodness, that many years ago. So I wrote that shortly, within a few years of him dying. And so, um, and then I wrote a few more. And then, as I mentioned, my mom lived another 12 years after that. So I really walked beside her more. And some of the poems I wrote were about kind of grieving his dad, after his death. But Tomes and Ducks was shortly after his death because I just remember, and for anybody who said goodbye at all, but if you said goodbye in a hospital room, just that surreal sense of during and after, and it's just horrid. But it really makes an impression on you. And I do remember literally tossing things into the trash and just like the body's still there. But and then just it was really grief therapy, frankly, to write and help me process a lot. And you're really when your parents are dying, you set aside the hard stuff of growing up and you just walk beside them and you live in the present with them. And then and then you have all those feelings when they're gone. And my mother died on March 17th, 2020, so right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so you had mentioned the isolation. My sister and brother and I, were in different states. It was very hard. It was like 14 or 15 months before we could have a memorial service. This is really rough grieving during COVID. But so I did a lot of writing when she was ill and going through chemo. And I don't think the book is totally grim. I mean, because I've tried to, without trying to, I mean, there's some humor in some of those experiences with your parents. I mean, you just have to laugh. Like I'm literally sauteing zucchini in my bra, and you're just like, and I would just sit with her while she ate. And I would make, when I started making these little casseroles for her, and whenever I cooked, I would make her a little portion and bring it over. And, but there was, they both had tremendous dignity and they really didn't feel sorry for themselves. And, my goal, obviously, my father had my mother, but my goal with my mom was really to try to help her, and my brother and my sister as well wanted her to have as much independence as she could and preserve her dignity, and let her have as much of a life as she could have. And she was, they were both very generous, and she was kind through and through. And may we all reflect that as we get older.
Jennifer, can you hear me?
I can. Thank you for
Okay.
being here, Connie. I'm seeing so many wonderful friends. Thank you all.
I appreciated your, was it Pills and Bills?
Yeah.
Because I did that with my mother and sitting at the kitchen table and those pill packers for the morning and the evening. And I can still hear the little clack when they closed. So every time I see a pill packer and hear that sound, I'm back in that kitchen, and you reminded me of that because it seems to be pretty universal for
Yeah.
those of us with older parents trying to help them stay in their homes. And yeah, all the hours of doing that.
Well, thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that. And I remember you walked beside your mom for a long, long time. And
yeah,
Connie has written some books and has an amazing short story, creative nonfiction about like breaking bread at was it at the KFC or?
yeah, yeah.
And it was just like absolutely beautiful, stunning story. But yeah, I think it's kind of Proustian, those experiences. And I don't want to re-traumatize anybody, but yeah, those memories when we wake up at 3 in the morning, we have them of like those distilled moments and
Mhm.
even smells and feelings and sounds. And, I think by the end, there were 6 of those damn pill things, for different times of day, 6.
Oh, God.
And I
Wow.
remember like I took a picture of them before I threw them all away because I just kind of had to note, for my own psyche that we were, every 2 hours pilling. And anyway, some other memories and stories. But yeah, thank you for mentioning that. I think I'd like to think, as I said, that we rise above the personal and get to the more universal. That through these poems, I hope I'm reaching common experiences that many people have lived through. Thank
And
you.
I would say Connie's response was directly in conversation. And I love that it sparks conversation. Richard, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. Jennifer, first, congratulations on the new book.
Thank you.
And do you know when it's going to be shipped?
Well, the shipping date, I'm told, is October 16th. And I didn't plant this question. The pre-publication sale is going on through August 21st. And I've been told, I'm not sure who they're using as their shipping service, but it may not arrive until like mid to late November. So I know you're all salivating for this book,
Yes,
but you might have to wait just a little longer. And I'm hoping to do a lot of house parties and book clubs and poetry readings in bookstores starting in 2027.
Wow.
Great. Well, I also wanted to ask, do you feel like you've kind of exhausted the subject with this book, or are you still finding poems to write about your family and especially your parents, or are you moving on to something new, or are you in that abyss between projects where we don't know what's next?
Well, that's a great question. And I think we always have more material to mine. And I think family, some of those memories still come back. And I have some poems that I've written that kind of got pulled out of that book. But these days I am in a community garden and I've been writing a lot of poems about gardening and the people in the garden and the personalities. And tell you what, they flow a lot more easily than those poems about losing your parents. You jot them down and it's like, wow, I got another one, versus that like really agonizing work of chronicling decline and grief and all the components of grief. And, we can go through all those different stages that, but I think there are, for better or for worse, I may have exhausted all of you, but I don't think I've exhausted the topic. So you may have to read some more of those, guys. I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Good question, though.
Yeah, good. I appreciate that question. Somebody had something to
I
say?
have a question. Yeah, it's Nancy.
Hey, Nancy.
Jennifer, I know you have so many wonderful poems. How do you cull them for a collection? And did you follow a chronological order or a thematic order, or just as your heart led you? How did you choose what to
Thank you.
put in
And
your collection?
Well, I mentioned, and that's a very good question. I mentioned Michael Glazer, who I met like in Carborough. They have a wonderful poetry weekend every year. And we were doing poetry in the round, which is just divine, where a bunch of poets sit in a circle and you go around and each person reads a poem. And you go all the way around the room and then you read another poem and you read another poem. You can have it on paper or on your phone, or if you want, you can read a poem by someone else. And he was a very generous person and was reading a lot of other people's poems. And the guy was a great poet in his own right. But he came up to me afterwards and he said, those poems about your mom, have you thought about writing a book? And I said, wow, thank you. I kind of like to, but I don't know quite what to do. And I reached out to him a year or so later and said, I pulled it together. So that's a good question, Nancy. I mean, I think, I shopped this book around and I came really close with a couple publishers who said, oh, we almost took it, but we felt like maybe you shouldn't have had these two poems together. And it's like, I would have worked with you. But I got a lot of feedback and I think I made the manuscript stronger. And I also, and some of the wonderful folks who helped me with some of these poems, Richard and Nancy, and I see Natalia there, got some feedback from them about poems. And where I thought something was duplicative, I would pull one out and just try to go with what I thought was strongest. And then, as all poets know, you write it, you set it aside, you bring it back, you work on it some more, you set it aside. And then while you're doing that, you're berating yourself for not writing anything new. And then that mean voice over here tells you you're a crappy poet, and that's, the imposter syndrome sets in. And then when you're writing, you say, well, you should be reading other people's poetry. When you're reading other things, you feel envious. And anyway, TMI, but that's, but in terms of ordering it, I tried to do it somewhat chronologically, but I also decided, even though obviously my parents were married and they both appear in both parts, I thought, well, make part of it more about your dad and make part of it more about your mom. So that's how it all came together. And it's still a work in progress. So it may shift, but we'll see. But thank you.
Thank you for that question. And also, one of the things that I wanted to say is that your humor is part of who you are. So of course it shows up in the work. And I think that balance and that awareness, our personal grieving is its own journey. Our relationship with our writing in poetry is another type of journey along that same thing. And then our awareness of like what makes it into art, what makes it something that, like your poem, did for all of us is, and like what Connie said, is that universal experience of saying goodbye to people that we love. And I think I deeply appreciate when people are brave and really vulnerable and right, and then craft it into art like you've done. So thank you for that.
That means a lot to me. Thank you. And I, again, like seeing so many wonderful folks on this Zoom just means the world to me. So thank you. Thank you for having me. And thanks to all the good folks who have been so encouraging and supportive
Well, you
throughout
got
my
to see the
life.
chat section because everything, we've got up there, what a gift you are. You'll see, Jennifer. Does
Oh
anybody
my.
else have a question for Jennifer before we move towards the open mic? Can we just take a moment to let her hear us clap and say thank you? Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Jennifer.
Thank you. That means so much to me. And I admire you all in so many ways. So that really means so much to me. Thank you.
Hey, you are so welcome and thank you. We're going to head to open mic. If I don't call your name and you said you wanted to read, just shout at me. I have Rich Higgins first, and just unmute.
Okay. I also come from a rural area that most people don't think there's any rural parts of, which is rural Long Island. grew up in a small fishing village of 2,500 people and a school district that covered 260 square miles. Not what people think of Long Island. Anyway, this is the poem. I don't think I've read this here before. I hope not. I have a problem sometimes with remembering. And it's in a book that I hope will be accepted soon. And the poem is entitled, Why Won't the Words Come Out? And stretched out in hospital garb, you lie there, tubes in arm, trying to gain life force while we chat of politics. Why can't I say I love you? Will the words never come? Assurances are uttered by us both, even knowing, both of us, their hollowness while I try not to pace. Wanting to cry, wishing to wail as you wane while I wait. Will you go home for Christmas? Of course not. It's too far away. And how are they in the office? Don't these questions get in the way? There should be more to say now. Why won't the words come out? It's time to go soon. I want to reach out. Would you mind? It's probably the last. You're going now. So stay well. Why can't I say I love you? Why won't the words come out?
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. That dovetailed and spoken the long conversation with Jennifer's poems. I have Karen Jackson next.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different tone. The title of this poem, which was published in Susurrus last winter, was To the Roach I Share a Bathroom With When Attending a Funeral. I also grew up in rural South Georgia, so this is where this happened. You surprised me careening down the white porcelain sink, although as a child I saw your ancestors darken our kitchen pipes, an invasion my father tried to end with poisoned pellets. But your family is a hardy bunch. I'm told you inherit the earth after we're gone, and I choose, since I'm here to help bury a man of God, and you too are one of God's creatures, and I am nearing my own demise, not to crush or flush you, assuming I'm still fast enough. And in the second it takes me to decide, you skitter down the drain, only to appear the next morning when I pull the shower curtain back, a brown scab plastered to the shower wall. That's when I mentally telegraph, I'll leave you alone if you'll stay put. And maybe you hear me, and maybe you don't. But from the time I turn the water on until I towel myself dry, you don't twitch your antennas or scale the tiles. I eyed you the whole time. Were you too eyeing me? And I congratulate myself on my Christian largesse, my Buddhist compassion, my pagan admiration. You are tenacious. But tonight, when your cousins writhe the walls, their exoskeletons crackling, I bolt from the bed, grab a flashlight.
Karen, perfect timing. I want to remind everybody, check the chat section for comments. I don't want you to miss it. Christy, I have you next.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Jennifer, I just wanted to say these poems are amazing. And you brought me back to pieces of my own grief journey tonight. I couldn't decide what I was going to read. And I settled on this when you talked about writing in the beginning of grief, because I wrote this poem 9 days after my daddy died. And I've only read it one time. So we're going to do this tonight. This is the poem I never wanted to write. While I stare at your shoes in a clear plastic hospital bag, willing myself to breathe. I run away from the living nightmare that forced me down an ICU corridor for the last time. Remembering clear blue eyes drinking me in as I promised to find my own way. Hot tears plaster loose ponytailed strands to my face, pour out jagged pain, multiply unanswered whys, watch grief bloom outside of myself. 1, 2, 3 moments we won't have. Machines on, machines off. Praying I don't forget your voice. Wanting to write anything else less urgent. Don't stop breathing.
Oh, wow.
Thank you, Christy. You did it. It's beautiful. And that's the conversation again, Jennifer. Thank you for bringing it. Nancy, I have you next.
There we go. I trotted out a father poem because I knew it would be a family kind of thing tonight. I grew up on the Philadelphia main line. My dad was 50 when I was born. I was the baby. So he was a little tired by the time I came around. Badminton with my father. Summer evenings after dinner, sometimes if I asked the right way, he'd leave his coffee and his Kent to bat a birdie over the net. Just for a little bit, he'd say. I knew the drill. He'd stand still, centered on his side, racket high. I'd calculate, breathe, and serve right to him every time. That was the deal. He'd return it short, long, right, left, wanting to go back inside to his chair and his baseball game and his bourbon. But I'd pivot and slip and reach and race, returning every volley back to him. As long as I lofted the birdie directly to Daddy, he'd stay with me alone, no interruptions. He was my daddy for those twilight moments until the bat swooped and the night came on, and it grew too dark to keep him.
Wow.
Holy cow, that last line, girl. All of it. But shoot. Kelly, I have you next.
Great, thank you. Thanks for inviting me, Jennifer. I've enjoyed this so much. I have a short one written after many years after my older son was born, and he came out a little blue. He was fine, but he was kind of blue when he was born. Anyway, I'm just recalling that. This one is called just called Born. Primo puckered boy you bodied, bruised blue, prune hurt, squeezed you'd squirt. Plasm, tussle, pinch of muscle, vessel very hum. Notice nexus, most connects us, mostly kicks us, mostly munching monad, pot of promise, wad of bond.
Find to unmute. Thank you, Kelly. Pinch of muscle. I have Pat next. Make sure you unmute. There you go.
I just did it. Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Your poems are not only powerful, but they've started this wonderful conversation about family and grief. And I think they touched every one of us.
Thank you.
Even if we didn't have the exact experience, have had something very similar.
Thank you.
And this poem is one that was in Kakalak years ago. And it's a grief poem, but it's not a poem from my personal experience. In fact, I stole the first two lines right out of a friend's mouth. She was trying to give me directions on how to get to her mechanic and follow her so that she could leave her car and I could give her a ride home. The title is Not Wife. I wish I could tell you more about where I'm going, the mystery of bones found in the river. I wish I could name the streets, the distance to the next turn, how the road forks past the oak tree where a rope swing hangs still. I wish I could tell you about the insistent sunlight, why a bruised sky can make me cry, and the moon. What new can be said about the moon? Or about a woman who walks jagged lines of sand, shifting with the tides. What washes onto the shore is usually dead. I wish I could tell you how my life bends like a rainbow, the way light sings in an arc. The reflected face is familiar. But what do I call her now? The old names hold expectations of others. Mother, daughter, sister, even friend, and wife, the most familiar, so fond, not yet former wife or ex-wife, certainly not wife. I wish I could tell you more about the names I am learning to call.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everybody, bringing that fire. Thank you, Pat. Oh my gosh. Our open mic, I oftentimes brag, but it really is true. If you've ever come here, you know everybody brings it. And Jennifer, that's part of the synergy of you being here. I have Cal next, and then I have Bob, and then Richard.
Okay. This is sort of a, well, anyway, this was a poetry in plain sight poem, and it's called Panic Ensues. His heart is beating in his ears, his blood flows like electric current, and his nerves go watery. Rushing fluid power from the high center of the brain, flushing through each neuron to the pads of his feet, which swell. He is hyper aware of every hair he ever had, through spine, but not through bones, and current runs down the center, cord and nerves. The stream in his spine is conductive, and all he is doing is watching election news on TV.
Truth. Thanks, Cal.
Okay.
Bob, I have you next.
Okay, this is a new one, and it's also very short, which should be no surprise. The snow. The snow brings creatures we don't recognize. Their footsteps are language we cannot understand.
Ooh, Bob. Yeah, I see a lot of people going, yes. Bob, we're going to be celebrating with Bob and Karen upcoming. Just as a reminder, we've got some fun stuff coming up. Richard Taylor.
All right. This poem is entitled Ways to Say Goodbye. And I was thrilled to have it accepted by South Florida Poetry Journal recently, and it's in their current issue online. Ways to Say Goodbye. The mouth goodbye. Hear the portmanteau derived from God be with ye, clipped and slurred over centuries as it passed through God be with ye on the way to goodbye. The hand goodbye likely began with mothers who taught their children to wiggle fingers for both high and by. From there, the gesture evolved to wrist flap, wave, and onward to gladiatorial bump, fist to chest. The foot goodbye, At first, a surreptitious pointing of toes toward the door sidled into the walkaway, at times stomping or shuffling in anger or resignation, accompanied by the necessary turning of the back, unless backing away with sword drawn. The ghost goodbye came in handy for self disappearances and estrangements, often without a word of or warning of any kind. The two-eyed goodbye may come with a nod, like the parting glance of one who has already said, "There is all there is to say," or bears the blank face of the refugee, a suitcase in each hand. Even dogs understand this look. The goodbye of dying, not as final as it seems, drops like a pebble in a pond, ripples spread in all directions, ever fading, never gone, until the cataclysm goodbye sweeps past. Black holes, exploding stars, ruining everything. But wait, there's a last dandelion to be puffed, seeds to be scattered. Hello, the match that lights the next universe.
Oh, thank you, Richard. That's fabulous. Now that we have a moment, is there anybody that didn't get to read that would like to? Natalia. Yes, please unmute.
Yes. All right, just a second. Now I need to scroll. I just need 1 second to find that one again.
No worries.
I was going to read something else, but I decided to go with the dead parent theme. Okay. The cicadas emerged today, a thick racket in the air, the sound of summer, the sticky south. Yesterday was Father's Day. No cicadas and no father. I smelled that one candle just because the smell of pine and smoke takes me back 1,000 years, 1,000 miles to those cool Moscow dacha summers, the nightly bonfire, sticky pine sap on my fingers, me still small, my dad still big, still strong, chopping firewood, his skin rough and dry, his jacket smoky, and I miss him.
Oh, that was gorgeous, Natalia. Thank you for reading that.
Thank you.
I love the dad still big. That really worked for me. Make sure you check the chat section, guys, if you were an open mic. So just kind of scroll through there. I don't want you to miss any of the comments. And I'm going to go ahead and read from one of my very first book, Lessons in Forgetting, because it's to the topic. My mother had early onset Alzheimer's. She was my age when she started having symptoms, and my dad was her main caregiver. The title is She Would Marry Him Again. She thinks I'm her hairdresser. I tell her my name's Anne, which it isn't, but it's an easy name. I call her Patty and bend her head over the sink to wash her white hair with gardenia soap. When I ask her if she has children, she laughs. I'm too young. I'm not even married yet. I say, of course, I knew that. I tell her I've heard that she dates a doctor named John who says he wants to marry her and grow old together. Suddenly she sits up, soap on top of her head, tears in her eyes. She says, I love him too. When he asks me, I'll say yes. When I recount this story to my father, he walks over to her hospital bed, says, Patty, will you marry me? But to hell with growing old. Oh. Jennifer, thank you. You see what you created. It's a beautiful
Thank you.
dialogue, beautiful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for creating this community. Be well. See you next week.
Thank you, Malika. Thanks to everyone for coming. Thank you.